Hey there, horror fans! Welcome back to BitBlitz, your go-to channel for spine-chilling tales and terrifying encounters. As we dive into the new year, I hope you're ready for some extra scares because we've got a special treat for you tonight. First off, I want to wish all of you creepy crawlers out there a happy new year. May your 2025 be filled with just the right amount of terror to keep you on your toes. Now, hold on to your seats because tonight we're cranking up the fear factor. Instead of our usual 3 horror stories, we're serving up a pentagram of panic with 5 bone-chilling tales that'll have you sleeping with the lights on. Before we plunge into the darkness, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It helps keep the monsters at bay. Or does it invite them in? Either way, you won't want to miss what's coming up next on BitBlitz. So, grab your favorite blanket to hide under. Maybe check that closet one more time. And stay tuned for a night of horror that'll kick off your new year with a scream. Story number 1. Breaking the loop. I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock blaring, the shrill noise cutting through the fog of sleep like a knife. It was 7 a.m., the start of another ordinary day in my mundane life. I rolled over, rubbing my eyes, and glanced at the calendar on my wall. December 30th. I had no plans, just another day to get through. As I stumbled out of bed, I felt an odd sensation creeping over me, a sense of déjà vu that I couldn't quite shake off. The same routine unfolded: shower, breakfast, and a quick check of my phone. The world outside was gray and dreary. The winter chill seeped through the windows, making me shiver as I pulled on my jacket. I left the house, locking the door behind me, and stepped into the cold air. The streets were quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic. I walked to the bus stop, where a few other commuters stood huddled against the wind. I glanced at my watch, 7:45 a.m. The bus arrived promptly, and I climbed aboard, finding a seat by the window. As we drove through town, I noticed something strange. Every face looked familiar, yet different. It was as if I had seen them all before in a dream. Shaking off the feeling, I focused on the scenery outside, the same shops, the same people rushing to work. When I arrived at work, everything seemed normal at first. My colleagues greeted me with their usual small talk. But then it happened. A loud crash echoed from the break room. Everyone rushed to see what had happened. A coffee machine had exploded, spraying hot liquid everywhere. We all laughed nervously, but deep down, something felt off. I glanced at the clock, 9 a.m., and suddenly felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The laughter faded into a dull roar as my vision blurred. When it cleared, I found myself back in bed, alarm blaring again. I shot up straight in bed, heart racing. Confusion gripped me as I realized it was 7 a.m. once more. The same day was repeating itself. Panic surged through me as I went through my morning routine again, each action feeling mechanical and hollow. I tried to change things up, skipping breakfast or taking a different route to work, but nothing worked. Each time I ended up back in bed at 7 a.m. Days turned into weeks, or so it felt, yet every time it was December 30th. My coworkers remained blissfully unaware of my plight. They continued their routines as if nothing was amiss. I became desperate for answers and began to notice small details that changed slightly each iteration: a different coffee stain on the floor or a new poster on the wall. One evening after work, determined to break free from this cycle, I decided to confront my boss about what was happening. As I approached his office, however, dread filled me. What if he didn't believe me? What if he thought I was losing my mind? I knocked on his door and stepped inside. "Can we talk?" He looked up from his desk with a puzzled expression but nodded. As I poured out my story about being trapped in this endless loop of December 30th, his face morphed from confusion to concern. "Walter," he said slowly, "I think you need some help." It was then that I realized how absurd this must sound to him, to anyone who hadn't experienced it themselves. Frustrated and defeated, I left his office and wandered home that night feeling more alone than ever. The streets were eerily quiet, as if they too were stuck in this loop with me. That night in bed, sleep eluded me as thoughts raced through my mind like a runaway train. What if this was some kind of punishment? What if I had done something terrible without realizing it? The next morning arrived with its usual blare of the alarm clock. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air that made me uneasy. As I got ready for work again, an idea struck me. I would not let this day pass without trying something drastic. Instead of going to work like usual, I would skip it entirely and see what happened. I left home and walked aimlessly through town instead of heading to the office. The cold wind bit at my skin as I wandered past familiar places that now felt foreign and haunting. Hours passed as I roamed aimlessly until night fell. Exhausted and defeated, I returned home only to find myself back in bed at 7 a.m. once more. Days turned into an indistinguishable blur of frustration and despair as each attempt to escape led back to that same moment in time, waking up on December 30th. Then one fateful morning, I woke up again but noticed something strange. There was a note on my bedside table written in shaky handwriting. "You must remember." My heart raced as fear gripped me. Who had been in my room? What did it mean? I spent that day obsessing over the note, while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy at work. My colleagues chatted around me while my mind spiraled deeper into confusion and fear. After work that evening, instead of returning home directly like before, I decided to visit an old bookstore downtown that had always intrigued me but which I'd never entered before. The bell chimed softly as I stepped inside. The smell of aged paper enveloped me like a warm blanket. Rows upon rows of books surrounded me as if they were waiting for someone to uncover their secrets. As I browsed through titles that seemed both familiar and foreign at once, one book caught my eye, a dusty tome titled Cycles of Time. I pulled it from the shelf and began flipping through its pages filled with strange symbols and illustrations depicting people trapped in loops similar to mine. A passage caught my attention. To break free from your cycle, you must confront your fears head-on. Could facing my fears truly be the key? That night back in bed, my mind raced with possibilities. But what did confronting my fears even mean? The next morning brought another repeat of December 30th. However, this time when my alarm rang out at 7 a.m., I felt an unfamiliar resolve wash over me. Instead of going through my usual routine mechanically, I decided to face what terrified me most. Being alone with myself. Truly alone without distractions or excuses. I spent hours reflecting on every regret and fear that haunted me. The relationships left unmade or broken. The dreams abandoned. All while feeling an overwhelming sense of despair wash over me like waves crashing against jagged rocks. But within that despair came clarity. Perhaps these were not just fears but lessons waiting for acknowledgement. A chance for growth hidden within pain. As dusk fell outside my window, I suddenly felt lighter, as if chains binding me had begun to dissolve one by one until finally, they shattered completely. That night, I drifted into sleep knowing tomorrow would be different, no longer bound by fear or regret but ready to embrace whatever came next. When morning light broke through my window, it wasn't just another December 30th, it was January 1st. The world outside seemed brighter than before, the air crisp with possibility. With newfound determination, I stepped outside ready to embrace life beyond repetition, grateful for lessons learned within darkness, and hopeful for brighter days ahead. And so began not just another year, but a new chapter filled with endless potential waiting just beyond every sunrise. A new dawn. As I stepped outside, the world felt transformed. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp winter air, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt free. The weight of the past month, no, the past eternity, lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer Walter, the man trapped in a loop of despair. I was Walter, a man reborn. I walked through the streets of my neighborhood, taking in the sights and sounds with fresh eyes. Children played in the park, their laughter ringing like music. Couples strolled hand in hand, their warmth radiating even in the chill of winter. For once, I felt connected to it all, as if I was part of a larger tapestry woven from countless lives and stories. Embracing change, I decided to visit my favorite cafe for breakfast, a small place called the Daily Grind that served the best coffee in town. As I entered, the familiar bell chimed above me, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me like a warm hug. The barista, a young woman named Mia, greeted me with a bright smile. "Hey there! Long time no see," she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I chuckled softly. "Yeah, it's been a while. Can I get my usual?" "Of course. One black coffee coming right up." As she prepared my drink, I glanced around the cafe. The walls were adorned with local art, vibrant colors and bold strokes that seemed to tell stories of their own. I felt an urge to create something too. Perhaps this year would be different, not just because of escaping a loop, but because I would actively shape my life. With my coffee in hand, I took a seat by the window. The warmth of the mug seeped into my palms as I sipped slowly, savoring each drop. My mind wandered to my dreams, the stories I had always wanted to write but never found the courage to start. What if this year was about more than just breaking free? What if it was about embracing who I truly was? A chance encounter. As I sat there lost in thought, an elderly man entered the cafe. He wore a long coat and a woolen scarf that looked like it had seen better days. His hair was white as snow, and his eyes sparkled with wisdom and mischief. He made his way to my table and nodded politely. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," I replied, intrigued by his presence. He settled into the chair across from me and studied me for a moment before speaking again. "You look like someone who's just escaped from something heavy." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his perceptiveness. "You could say that." "Good," he said with a grin that crinkled his face. "Life has a way of throwing us into loops sometimes, trapping us until we learn what we need to learn." His words struck a chord deep within me. "How did you know?" "I've been there myself," he replied with a knowing smile. "But every loop has its lesson. You just have to be willing to listen." I leaned forward, eager to hear more about this mysterious man and his experiences. We talked for what felt like hours, sharing stories about life's challenges and triumphs. He spoke about loss and love, about how every ending is merely a new beginning waiting to unfold, a new path. When we finally parted ways, he left me with one final piece of advice. Embrace your fears and your passions alike. They are two sides of the same coin. As I walked home that day, his words echoed in my mind. Perhaps it was time to confront not just my fears but also my dreams, the stories waiting patiently within me. That evening, I pulled out an old notebook from my desk, a relic from days long gone when I had tried to write but had given up too easily. With renewed determination, I began to write. The words flowed like water from a broken dam. Ideas spilled onto the pages faster than I could keep up with them. Characters came alive before my eyes, haunting figures who danced through shadows and light as they navigated their own loops of despair and hope. The first story. Days turned into weeks as I poured myself into writing every night after work. Each story became cathartic, a way to explore not only my fears but also the triumphs that lay beyond them. One story emerged that particularly resonated with me. It was about a man trapped in an endless cycle of December 30th, a reflection of my own experience but infused with magic and mystery. In this tale, he discovered that each repetition revealed hidden truths about himself and those around him. As I typed out the final words one chilly evening in late January, tears filled my eyes, not from sadness but from joy. This story was more than just fiction. It was proof of transformation, a testament to resilience and growth. Sharing my journey. With newfound courage, I decided to share my work online through writing forums and social media platforms dedicated to storytelling. To my surprise, people resonated with my tale. They shared their own experiences of feeling trapped or lost in life cycles. Encouraged by their responses, I began writing more frequently, exploring different genres while weaving elements of horror into some pieces as well. A nod to the darkness that had once consumed me during those endless days. As spring approached, so did opportunities for growth. Local writers' groups formed where aspiring authors gathered to share their work and support one another on their journeys. A new beginning. One evening at a local open mic night hosted by one such group, I stood nervously at the front of the room, clutching my notes tightly against my chest while glancing out at faces eager for stories yet untold. With each word spoken aloud, the fear that once gripped me faded away, replaced by exhilaration as laughter erupted during humorous moments, while gasps filled silence during darker passages. When it ended, the applause rang loud like thunder, and suddenly, I realized how far I'd come since that fateful day when time had frozen around me. The elderly man from the daily grind appeared again among the crowd, his smile wide as he nodded approvingly at me before disappearing into the night once more. But this time, I knew he wasn't just some figment of imagination. He represented everything I'd learned along this journey, life beyond loops. As months passed into years, I continued writing while embracing every opportunity presented before me. Each day became an adventure filled not only with fears confronted but also dreams pursued passionately, no longer bound by loops or regrets. I found solace within creativity itself, a reminder that even when darkness threatens to consume us, we hold within ourselves an undeniable light capable of illuminating paths previously unseen. And so here I am today, Walter, the man who once lived trapped in an endless cycle, now thriving beyond its confines. Each sunrise brings new possibilities waiting just beyond horizon, reminding me that life is not merely about escaping loops, but rather embracing every moment fully. This year would be different, not because time had reset, but because I had finally learned how to live. The end. Story number 2. The night we fought the werewolf. A tale of transformation. I remember the night everything changed. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind that makes the air feel electric with anticipation. I had just returned from a long day at work, my mind buzzing with thoughts of deadlines and meetings. As I stepped through the door, my golden retriever, Max, bounded toward me, his tail wagging furiously. He was my constant companion, always there to lift my spirits after a long day. The calm before the storm. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our small backyard. I threw on a sweater and took Max outside for his evening walk. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. We ventured down our usual path, a winding trail that led into a small wooded area behind our house. As we walked deeper into the woods, I felt an unsettling chill creep up my spine. It wasn't just the cold, something felt off. Max, usually so carefree, was unusually alert, his ears perked up and his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. I tried to shake off my unease. After all, it was just a walk in the woods, but then I heard it, a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, deep and primal. Max froze in place, his body tense as he stared into the darkness of the trees. My heart raced as I strained to see what lay ahead. The encounter. Suddenly, out of the shadows, a figure emerged. At first glance, it appeared to be a large dog, but as it stepped into the moonlight, I realized it was something far more sinister, a werewolf. Its fur glistened under the pale light, and its eyes glowed with a feral hunger. My breath caught in my throat as panic surged through me. "Max! Come here!" I shouted, trying to pull him back toward me. But he stood his ground, growling fiercely at the creature that loomed before us. The werewolf let out a deafening howl that echoed through the woods, sending birds flapping from their nests in alarm. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, and instinct kicked in. I turned and ran. Fight or flight. I could hear its heavy footsteps pounding behind me as I sprinted through the underbrush, branches clawing at my arms and legs. Max kept pace beside me, barking fiercely as if trying to ward off the beast that pursued us. "Keep running!" I urged him, desperation fueling my legs as we dashed deeper into the woods. My mind raced with thoughts of survival. I couldn't let this creature catch us. Just when I thought we might escape, I stumbled over a root and fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through my ankle as I scrambled to get back on my feet. The werewolf's growl grew louder behind me. It was closing in. "Max!" I cried out as he turned back toward me, his loyalty unwavering even in the face of danger. He stood between me and the advancing beast, barking defiantly. The stand. In that moment of sheer terror, something shifted within me. I couldn't let fear consume us. We had to fight back. "Stay close!" I commanded Max as I scrambled to my feet. The werewolf lunged again, but this time Max met it head-on. They collided with a ferocious growl that reverberated through the trees. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them wrestle. Max's golden fur contrasted starkly against the dark beast's coat. "Get him, Max!" I shouted as adrenaline coursed through my veins. The two creatures rolled on the ground, teeth snapping and claws slashing at one another. In that moment of chaos, I spotted a fallen branch nearby, thick and sturdy enough to serve as a weapon. With no time to waste, I grabbed it and rushed toward them. The battle. As I approached, Max managed to gain the upper hand for just a moment, pinning down one of the werewolf's legs with his powerful jaws. But it was only a fleeting victory. With a savage twist of its body, the werewolf threw Max aside like a rag doll. "No!" I screamed as Max yelped in pain but quickly regained his footing. Fueled by fear for my beloved dog and desperation to survive, I swung the branch at the werewolf with all my strength. It connected with a sickening thud against its side. The creature snarled in rage and turned its attention toward me. With its glowing eyes locked onto mine, time seemed to freeze for an instant. Then it lunged at me with terrifying speed, a moment of desperation. I barely had time to react as it barreled toward me. Instinctively raising my arms to shield myself from its attack felt like an eternity stretching out before me. But just before it reached me, Max leaped forward again, this time aiming for its throat. The two collided once more in a flurry of fur and claws. My heart raced as they struggled. Every second felt like an hour as they fought for dominance. "Come on! You can do it!" I urged Max desperately while searching for another weapon or any means of escape. The werewolf twisted around and swiped at Max with its massive claws. Blood sprayed across the ground as it caught him on his side. A howl of pain escaped Max's mouth, but he didn't back down. In that moment of chaos and fear, something deep within me ignited. A primal instinct to protect what mattered most surged through my veins like fire. The turning tide. I picked up another branch from the ground, this one thicker, and charged at the werewolf just as it prepared to strike again at Max. With all my might, I swung it down onto its back with a force fueled by pure desperation. The creature howled in surprise and pain but didn't falter completely, its attention now divided between us both. "Max! Now!" I shouted as we coordinated our attack instinctively, the bond between us stronger than ever before. Max darted around to distract it while I prepared for another strike. As he nipped at its heels and barked ferociously to keep its focus away from me, I took aim once more, and swung again with everything inside me. This time it connected solidly against its skull. A sickening crack echoed through the night air as it staggered backward. The final confrontation. The werewolf shook its head violently but didn't fall. It was still standing between us and freedom. My heart raced wildly. We had come too far to give up now. "Max! One more time!" With renewed determination coursing through our veins like electricity surging through wires ready to ignite a flame, we charged together towards our enemy once more. Max lunged forward again, while I swung high above him aiming directly for its throat this time. The branch connected hard against its neck. The creature let out an agonizing roar that seemed to shake the very earth beneath us before collapsing heavily onto its side. A final growl escaping its lips before silence enveloped us both like a blanket thrown over an extinguished fire. Aftermath. Panting heavily from exertion, I dropped beside Max, who lay breathing heavily but alive. Relief washed over me like waves crashing onto shore after an endless storm. I hugged him tightly, feeling gratitude swell within every fiber of my being. We had survived, but even in victory, the reality set in slowly. The woods around us felt eerily still, now devoid of sounds save for our ragged breaths echoing off trees looming overhead like silent sentinels watching over our fragile existence amidst darkness surrounding us both physically and emotionally alike. As dawn began breaking over horizon, painting sky hues orange and pink, an unsettling thought crept into mind. Was this truly over? What if there were more lurking beyond shadows, waiting patiently until next full moon? I glanced down at Max, who looked up at me with those trusting eyes filled not only loyalty, but also understanding. We would face whatever came next together. With newfound resolve, we began making our way back home, knowing full well that life would never be quite same again. The days after, the following weeks, were a blur of anxiety and hypervigilance. Every sound, every shadow made me jump. Max's wounds healed slowly, 3 deep gashes along his side that required multiple visits to the vet. I told them he'd been attacked by a wild dog, but the look in the veterinarian's eyes told me she didn't quite believe my story. The cuts were too large, too savage for any normal canine. I spent countless hours researching werewolves online, diving deep into folklore and mythology. The creature we'd encountered didn't match all the traditional stories. It hadn't been a full moon that night, and silver bullets weren't mentioned in my frantic Google searches as the only way to kill them. But one thing was certain, we had been lucky to survive. Strange changes. As Max recovered, I noticed subtle changes in him. His senses seemed heightened, even for a dog. He would growl at shadows before I could even see them, and his protective instincts became almost overwhelming. He wouldn't let delivery people near our door anymore, and his usually friendly demeanor toward strangers turned wary and suspicious. One night, about 3 weeks after the incident, I caught him staring at his reflection in the sliding glass door. His eyes seemed to gleam with an unusual intelligence, and for a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn they flashed with that same otherworldly glow I'd seen in the werewolf's eyes. "Max?" I whispered, and he turned to look at me, tail wagging as if nothing was different. But I knew better. Something had changed that night in the woods, something fundamental, the return. It happened on a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 month after our first encounter. Max began pacing restlessly by the back door, whining in a way I'd never heard before. The sound sent chills down my spine. It wasn't his normal "I need to go out" whine. This was different, urgent, almost human in its desperation. When I finally opened the door, he shot into the backyard like a bullet. I followed him, flashlight in hand, my heart pounding against my ribs. The beam of light caught his golden fur as he stood at the edge of our property, hackles raised and teeth bared. That's when I heard it again, that same deep, guttural growl from the woods. But this time, it wasn't coming from just one direction. There were multiple sources, surrounding us in the darkness. "They're back," I whispered, more to myself than to Max. And they brought friends, the pack. 3 pairs of glowing eyes emerged from the darkness. The werewolves were smaller than the one we'd fought before, but they moved with the same predatory grace. Max pressed against my leg, his body trembling not with fear, but with anticipation. I gripped the baseball bat I'd taken to carrying with me. It wasn't much, but it was better than a branch. "We can't fight them all, boy," I said softly. "We need to get back inside." But as I turned to retreat, a 4th set of eyes appeared between us and the house. We were surrounded. The largest of the pack stepped forward, moonlight glinting off its silver-streaked fur. Unlike the others, this one seemed more controlled, more intelligent. It tilted its head as it studied us, almost as if it were curious rather than hungry. That's when Max did something I'll never forget. He stepped forward, placed himself between me and the pack leader, and let out a sound that was neither bark nor growl. It was something in between, something that made the hair on my arms stand on end. The pack leader responded with a similar sound, and for several tense moments, it seemed like they were communicating. I stood frozen, barely breathing, as this impossible exchange took place in my backyard. The choice, what happened next, still haunts my dreams. The pack leader lowered its massive head, not in submission, but in what appeared to be recognition. Max's tail wagged once, twice, and then he looked back at me with those eyes, those knowing, changed eyes. In that moment, I understood. The bite from our first encounter had affected him more than I'd realized. He wasn't just my pet anymore. He was something more, something in between. And now he had a choice to make. "Max," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Please!" He pressed his nose against my hand one last time, his familiar warmth a stark contrast to the cold night air. Then he turned and walked toward the pack, his golden fur shimmering in the moonlight. The werewolves parted to let him through, and as I watched, his form began to shift and change. It wasn't violent or grotesque like in the movies. It was beautiful in its own terrible way, like watching a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis. The goodbye, where my golden retriever had stood moments before, a magnificent creature now stood, larger than a normal wolf but smaller than the others, with fur that still held hints of its original golden color. He turned to look at me one last time, and in those eyes I saw everything: gratitude, love, and a wild freedom that had always been there, waiting to be unleashed. The pack melted back into the darkness with Max among them, leaving me alone in my backyard with nothing but memories and questions. I never saw him again after that night, but sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I can hear a familiar howl in the distance. Not quite wolf, not quite dog, but something uniquely Max. I still walk in the woods sometimes, carrying my baseball bat and wearing the silver pendant I bought after that first encounter. I'm not afraid anymore. I know they're out there, and I know Max is with them. He's protecting me in his own way now, keeping the darker, more dangerous creatures at bay. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is bright, I leave his favorite tennis ball in the backyard. In the morning, it's always gone, and there are large paw prints in the dirt. A reminder that my brave companion is still out there, living between two worlds, forever changed by that one fateful night when we fought a werewolf together. The end. Story number 3. The Wendigos Hunt. A tale of survival in the winter woods. Tom had always been drawn to the wild, a passion instilled in him by his father, who had taken him on countless camping trips into the heart of the forest. The tranquility of nature was a balm for Tom's restless spirit, and he cherished every moment spent among the towering trees and whispering winds. But one fateful winter day, his love for the wilderness would lead him down a path of horror that would change his life forever. The Call of the Wild. It was late December, and the snow blanketed the ground like a thick, white shroud. Tom had decided to venture deeper into the woods than ever before, seeking solitude and adventure. He packed his gear, a sturdy tent, a sleeping bag rated for extreme cold, and enough food to last him several days. As he set off, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily among the trees. The air was crisp and biting, each breath visible as a puff of mist. Tom relished the chill. It invigorated him. He hiked for hours, marveling at the beauty of the frost-covered branches and the serene silence that enveloped him. But as dusk fell, an unsettling feeling crept into his mind. The forest seemed to come alive with whispers, soft murmurs that echoed just beyond his hearing. A night in the woods, setting up camp was a familiar routine for Tom. He pitched his tent in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, their branches heavy with snow. As night descended, he built a fire, its warm glow flickering against the encroaching darkness. The crackling flames provided comfort, but as he sat there alone, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it an otherworldly sound, a low growl that sent shivers down Tom's spine. He dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks on him. After all, he was alone in the woods during winter, a time when nature could be both beautiful and terrifying. As he settled into his sleeping bag that night, sleep eluded him. The growling persisted outside his tent, growing louder and more menacing with each passing hour. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Tom unzipped his tent and peered out into the darkness. The Wendigo. What he saw made his blood run cold. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen, a Wendigo. Its emaciated body loomed tall against the backdrop of trees, its skin stretched tight over protruding bones. Sunken eyes glowed with an unnatural light as it stared directly at him. Tom's heart raced as he stumbled back into his tent, frantically zipping it shut. He could hear its claws scraping against the ground outside, a sound that sent terror coursing through him. The legends of the Wendigo flooded back to him, stories told around campfires about a spirit born from greed and starvation, a creature that craved human flesh and grew larger with every victim consumed. He had heard tales of how Wendigos were once human beings who succumbed to cannibalism during desperate times. Now they roamed the forest eternally hungry, seeking to satiate their insatiable appetite by preying on those who wandered too far from safety. The chase begins. As night deepened, Tom's fear morphed into desperation. He knew he couldn't stay in his tent forever. Eventually, it would find him. After what felt like hours of silence punctuated by occasional growls from outside, he made a decision. He had to escape. Gathering what little courage remained within him, Tom unzipped his tent once more and bolted into the night. The cold air hit him like a slap across the face as he sprinted away from his campsite. He didn't look back. He could feel its presence behind him, an unholy pursuit fueled by hunger. The forest was a blur as he ran through it blindly, branches clawing at his clothes and face. He stumbled over roots and rocks but pressed on. Survival instincts kicked in hard as adrenaline surged through his veins. Into darkness, Tom ran until exhaustion threatened to take over. Finally, he found himself at a small ravine where moonlight filtered through the trees above. He paused to catch his breath but quickly realized that silence had fallen around him, too quiet for comfort. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush sent panic coursing through him again. Without thinking twice, Tom scrambled down into the ravine and hid behind a large boulder covered in moss. Heart pounding in his chest like a war drum, he listened intently for any sign of movement. Minutes felt like hours as he crouched there in darkness until finally, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against stone followed by heavy breathing that echoed around him like thunder. The encounter. As fear threatened to consume him entirely, Tom caught sight of movement above. The Wendigo stood at the edge of the ravine peering down at him with its glowing eyes fixed intently on its prey. It let out an otherworldly howl that reverberated through Tom's bones, a sound filled with hunger and malice. With no options left and nowhere to run, Tom knew he had to confront this nightmare head-on or become another victim lost to its insatiable appetite. In a moment of sheer desperation fueled by survival instinct, he grabbed a jagged rock from beside him and prepared himself for what lay ahead. As it leaned closer to get a better look at its prey, Tom hurled the rock with all his strength toward its head. It struck true but barely fazed the creature. Instead of retreating or showing signs of pain, it let out an enraged roar that echoed through the forest. A fight for survival. The Wendigo lunged forward with terrifying speed. Its elongated limbs moved unnaturally fast as it descended into the ravine after Tom. He barely managed to dodge its grasping claws but felt one slice across his leg. A searing pain shot through him like fire, igniting every nerve ending. Tom stumbled back against another rock face as blood soaked through his pants. Panic surged within him as he realized how vulnerable he truly was now, injured and cornered by this monstrous being driven by an unquenchable thirst for flesh. In that moment of despair came clarity. If he were to survive this encounter with such an evil spirit born from humanity's darkest impulses, he would have to fight back not just physically but mentally too, embracing fear, drawing upon every ounce of strength left within him despite overwhelming fear threatening to consume him whole. Tom began shouting at the creature in defiance. "You won't take me! I refuse to be your next meal!" The Wendigo paused momentarily at this unexpected display of courage. Perhaps it sensed something different about this human, something worth devouring more than mere flesh alone. Fueled by adrenaline coursing through every vein, Tom seized this momentary distraction from despair. Grabbing another rock nearby, he hurled it once more towards its head, but this time aiming not just for impact but intent behind each throw. With every strike landing true, it seemed momentarily confused by this unexpected resistance, a desperate escape. Realizing time was running out, the Wendigo regained focus once more. It lunged forward again, but this time Tom anticipated its move, dodging left instead right. He scrambled up onto higher ground using sheer willpower alone, with newfound determination surging through every fiber within. He clambered up out of reach, but not without cost. His leg throbbed painfully beneath him, a reminder of how close death had come. As dawn began breaking across horizon, illuminating snowy landscape around them, Tom spotted an opening leading deeper into woods. With one last desperate push fueled by hope, he sprinted towards safety. The aftermath. Days later, when found by search parties looking for missing hiker, Tom lay unconscious yet alive. His leg, however, would never heal completely. Doctors informed him they had no choice but amputate below knee due to severe damage inflicted during encounter. Though scarred physically, Tom emerged stronger mentally. He returned home carrying haunting memories etched forever within mind. A survivor's tale passed down generations, reminding others about dangers lurking just beyond comfort zones. Though Sarah wasn't part story anymore, it became clear she'd always remained tethered somewhere deep inside heart, guiding choices made thereafter. In time, he learned to embrace scars left behind. They told stories worth sharing, reminding everyone about fragility life holds, while also showcasing resilience found amidst chaos. And so, the legend lived on, not just about Wendigos, but also about those brave enough to stand against them, even when faced insurmountable odds stacked high against them. The end. Story number 4. The Curse of Blackwood Hollow. A Tale of Treasure and Truth. Freddy and the Cursed Treasure. Chapter 1. The Call of Adventure. Freddy Thompson had always been fascinated by tales of lost treasures. Growing up in a small coastal town, he spent countless hours reading about pirates, hidden gold, and cursed artifacts. His imagination was ignited by stories of brave adventurers who faced unimaginable dangers for the sake of fortune. However, nothing could prepare him for the day he stumbled upon an ancient map that would lead him to a treasure unlike any other. One rainy afternoon, while rummaging through his late grandfather's attic, Freddy discovered a dusty chest. Inside lay an assortment of old trinkets, but what caught his eye was a rolled-up parchment adorned with strange symbols and markings. As he carefully unrolled it, his heart raced. It was a treasure map. The faded ink hinted at a location deep within the nearby woods, rumored to hold the legendary cursed treasure of Blackwood Hollow. Chapter 2. The Legend of Blackwood Hollow. Freddy's excitement was palpable as he researched the legend behind the treasure. According to local folklore, Blackwood Hollow was once home to a notorious pirate named Captain Elias Blackwood. He had amassed a fortune through nefarious deeds, but before he could enjoy his riches, he was betrayed by his crew. In his dying breath, Blackwood cursed his treasure, vowing that anyone who sought it would face dire consequences. The tales warned of strange occurrences in the woods, disembodied whispers at night, shadows lurking just out of sight, and those who ventured too close often vanished without a trace. Despite the warnings, Freddy felt an irresistible pull toward the adventure that awaited him. Chapter 3: Gathering Supplies. Determined to uncover the treasure and prove the legends wrong, Freddy began preparing for his expedition. He gathered supplies, a sturdy backpack, flashlight, rope, and snacks for the journey. As he packed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was embarking on something truly dangerous. He decided to enlist the help of his best friend, Mark. Mark was skeptical about the cursed treasure but couldn't resist the allure of adventure either. The two friends spent hours discussing their plans over pizza that night, their excitement growing with every passing moment. Chapter 4: Into the Woods. The following morning, armed with a map and their gear, Freddy and Mark set off into the dense woods surrounding their town. The air was thick with anticipation as they followed the winding trails marked on the map. As they ventured deeper into Blackwood Hollow, an eerie silence enveloped them. Even the birds seemed to have retreated. After hours of hiking and navigating through thick underbrush, they finally arrived at a clearing marked on the map. A large oak tree with gnarled roots protruding from the ground like skeletal fingers. According to the map, this was where they would find Captain Blackwood's treasure. Chapter 5: Digging for Gold. With shovels in hand, Freddy and Mark began to dig beneath the oak tree. Each scoop of dirt felt like it could reveal untold riches or unleash an ancient curse. After what felt like an eternity of digging, their shovels struck something solid, a wooden chest bound with rusted iron. Freddy's heart raced as they pried open the chest. Inside lay gold coins glimmering in the dim light, and ornate jewelry encrusted with jewels. They had found it. But as they celebrated their discovery, a chill ran down Freddy's spine. Something felt off. Chapter 6: The Curse Awakens. As they filled their bags with treasure, dark clouds gathered overhead. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, sending leaves swirling around them like angry spirits. Mark looked uneasy, but Freddy dismissed his concerns. This was just nature reacting to their excitement. However, as they turned to leave, they noticed strange symbols carved into the oak tree glowing faintly. Freddy felt a sense of dread wash over him as he realized they might have awakened something sinister by disturbing Blackwood's resting place. Chapter 7: The Haunting Begins. That night at home, Freddy couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling. As he lay in bed counting his newfound wealth in his mind, strange noises echoed through his house, whispers that seemed to call his name. He brushed it off as exhaustion from their adventure, but over the next few days, things escalated. Shadows flickered at the corners of his vision, objects moved inexplicably around his room, and nightmares plagued his sleep, visions of Captain Blackwood's ghostly figure warning him to return what he had taken. Chapter 8: Seeking Answers. Desperate for answers, Freddy visited Old Man Jenkins, the town historian known for his knowledge of local legends. Jenkins listened intently as Freddy recounted their discovery and its aftermath. "You've disturbed something you shouldn't have," Jenkins warned gravely. "The curse is real. Many have tried to claim Blackwood's treasure and paid dearly for it." Freddy felt a knot tighten in his stomach as Jenkins recounted tales of those who had sought the treasure only to meet tragic ends, lost in the woods or driven mad by whispers only they could hear. Chapter 9: The Decision. Faced with mounting evidence that they had unleashed a curse upon themselves, Freddy knew what he had to do: return to Blackwood Hollow and return the treasure before it consumed him entirely. Mark was hesitant but understood that they had no choice if they wanted peace again. They gathered their gear once more and set out toward the woods under cover of darkness. Chapter 10: Confronting Darkness. As they approached the clearing where they had found the chest, Freddy felt an oppressive weight in the air, a palpable sense of dread that made every step feel heavier than before. The glowing symbols on the oak tree pulsed ominously as if aware of their presence. "Maybe we shouldn't have come back," Mark whispered nervously. "We need to do this," Freddy replied firmly. "We can't let this curse take us." They reached the chest and carefully placed each coin and piece of jewelry back inside. As they did so, a low rumble echoed through the clearing, a warning from beyond. Chapter 11, The Reckoning. As soon as they closed the chest lid once more, a deafening silence fell over them. But then came a voice, a deep growl that reverberated through their bones. "Who dares disturb my rest?" A shadowy figure emerged from behind the oak tree, the ghostly form of Captain Elias Blackwood himself. Freddy's heart raced as he faced down the specter of the pirate captain whose greed had led him to this fate. "I return what is yours!" Freddy shouted defiantly despite trembling inside. Blackwood's eyes glowed with fury and disbelief as he reached out toward them with skeletal hands. "You think you can undo what has been done?" Chapter 12, A Bargain with Fate. In that moment of desperation and fear, Freddy remembered something Old Man Jenkins had said about appeasing restless spirits, offering something in return for peace. "Wait!" Freddy yelled desperately. "What if we promise never to seek your treasure again? We'll leave this place forever." Blackwood paused mid-motion. There was a flicker of interest in his hollow gaze. "A promise? You think words alone will suffice?" Freddy nodded vigorously. "We swear it! Just let us go." The ghostly figure considered this for a moment before slowly retreating into shadowy mist surrounding him. "Very well," Blackwood said finally. "But know this, you will always carry my curse until you fulfill your promise." Chapter 13, Freedom at Last. With that ominous warning hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst, Freddy and Mark fled from Blackwood Hollow without looking back. They emerged from the woods into daylight feeling both relieved and haunted by what had transpired. Days turned into weeks as life returned to normal, or so it seemed on the surface. Yet both boys felt an unsettling presence lingering just out of sight. Shadows seemed darker than before and whispers echoed faintly in quiet moments. Chapter 14, Living with Shadows. Though they never spoke about it again openly, both boys knew that part of them remained tethered to Blackwood Hollow, their lives now intertwined with its dark history forevermore. Freddy often found himself staring into space, lost in thought about what lay beneath that cursed oak tree, the treasure still buried deep within its roots, waiting for another foolhardy soul brave enough or foolish enough to claim it again someday. Chapter 15, A New Beginning. Years later, when Freddy became an adult filled with ambition yet haunted by memories from childhood adventures gone awry, he often revisited those tales shared among friends around campfires or whispered during sleepovers late into nightfall, always ending with cautionary tales about curses left undisturbed beneath ancient oaks hidden deep within. Dark woods filled with secrets waiting patiently for new explorers seeking glory without realizing price must be paid first before fortune could ever be claimed. And thus ended one chapter while opening another, a reminder that some treasures are best left buried beneath layers time itself cannot erase nor spirits forget easily. Chapter 16, The Weight of Secrets. As Freddy grew older, the memories of Blackwood Hollow faded into the background of his life, but the weight of the curse lingered. He pursued a career in archaeology, driven by a desire to uncover history rather than seek fortune. Yet, every time he unearthed an artifact, a flicker of unease would wash over him, as if the shadows of the past were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. Mark had taken a different path. He moved away shortly after their encounter with Blackwood, seeking a fresh start far from the haunted woods. They kept in touch sporadically, but the bond they once shared was strained by unspoken fears and lingering guilt. Chapter 17, The Invitation. One evening, Freddy received an unexpected message from Mark. It was an invitation to a reunion of their old friends back in their hometown. The thought of seeing familiar faces filled him with nostalgia, but it also stirred up memories he had tried to bury. Despite his reservations, Freddy decided to attend. Perhaps reconnecting with old friends would help him shake off the shadows that clung to him. As he drove through the familiar streets, memories flooded back, laughter, adventures, and that fateful day in Blackwood Hollow. Chapter 18, old friends and new tensions. The reunion was held at a local pub where they had spent countless evenings as teenagers. As Freddy entered, he was greeted with warm smiles and laughter. Yet, there was an undercurrent of tension that he couldn't ignore. Conversations paused when he mentioned Mark's absence. "Have you heard from him lately?" one friend asked, concern etched on her face. Freddy shrugged. "Not much. He seemed eager to leave everything behind, but deep down, Freddy knew that Mark's departure wasn't just about starting anew. It was about escaping the shadows that haunted them both. Chapter 19. A Ghost from the Past. Later in the evening, as the group reminisced over drinks, Freddy felt a chill run down his spine. The laughter faded as one friend recounted a recent incident involving strange occurrences in Blackwood Hollow. Disappearances and sightings of ghostly figures. "They say it's cursed," she said nervously. "People have gone missing after trying to find that treasure again." Freddy's heart raced as he exchanged glances with another friend who had been there that day. They both understood what was at stake. The curse was still alive and well. Chapter 20. The Decision to Return. That night, unable to sleep, Freddy found himself staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories and whispers from Blackwood Hollow. He realized that he couldn't run from his past any longer. He needed closure. The next morning, he called Mark. After several rings, Mark picked up hesitantly. "Freddy? Is everything okay?" Mark's voice was cautious. "I need to go back," Freddy said without preamble. "To Blackwood Hollow." There was a long pause before Mark replied. "You know we promised never to go back there again." "I know," Freddy admitted. "But I can't shake this feeling that we need to confront it once and for all." After some back-and-forth discussion filled with apprehension and nostalgia for their childhood adventures, Mark reluctantly agreed to join him. Chapter 21. Returning to Darkness. The following weekend found them standing at the edge of Blackwood Hollow once more. The trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels guarding secrets long forgotten. As they stepped into the woods, an eerie silence enveloped them, a stark contrast to their youthful bravado on that fateful day. "We shouldn't have come back," Mark murmured as they approached the clearing. "We have to face this," Freddy replied firmly. "For us and for everyone else who might be affected by this curse." Chapter 22. The Oak Tree's Whisper. As they reached the clearing where they had unearthed the treasure years ago, Freddy felt a chill run down his spine. The oak tree stood tall and imposing, its gnarled roots twisting like fingers reaching out toward them. "Do you think it remembers us?" Mark whispered nervously. Freddy stepped closer to the tree and placed his hand on its rough bark. "I think it remembers everything." Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling leaves and sending shivers down their spines. Freddy felt a presence, an energy crackling in the air around them. "Let's get this over with," Mark urged as he pulled out a small shovel they had brought along. Chapter 23. Unearthing Truths. They began digging near the base of the tree where they had originally found the treasure chest. Each shovelful of dirt felt heavier than before. It was as if they were unearthing not just soil but also buried memories and regrets. After several minutes of digging, they struck something solid again, a wooden chest bound with rusted iron just like before. Freddy's heart raced as they pried it open once more. Inside lay not gold or jewels but rather old maps and journals belonging to Captain Blackwood himself. Documents detailing his life as a pirate and the events leading up to his betrayal. "This isn't treasure," Mark said incredulously as he leafed through the pages filled with scrawled notes and drawings of ships and battles. "It's history," Freddy replied with awe. "This is what we were meant to find." Chapter 24. The Curse Revealed. As they examined the contents more closely, they discovered something unsettling, a final entry written in shaky handwriting. Asterisk. "To those who seek my treasure, you will find not gold but knowledge of my fate. I cursed my riches not for greed but for vengeance against those who betrayed me." Asterisk. Freddy felt a wave of understanding wash over him. Captain Blackwood's curse wasn't just about wealth. It was about warning others against betrayal and greed. Maybe we were never meant to take anything from here, Freddie mused aloud. Perhaps we were meant to learn from it. Mark nodded slowly as realization dawned on them both. The curse could only be lifted by acknowledging its true purpose rather than seeking material gain. Chapter 25. A New Pact. With newfound resolve, they carefully placed everything back into the chest and closed it gently. We need to leave this here, Freddie said firmly. It belongs to Blackwood Hollow, Mark agreed without hesitation. Together they buried the chest once more beneath layers of earth while whispering apologies for disturbing its resting place again. As they finished burying it deep within roots entwined around secrets long hidden away, an overwhelming sense of peace washed over them both. Perhaps now they could finally move forward without fear tethering them down anymore. Chapter 26. Leaving Shadows Behind. As they made their way back through Blackwood Hollow towards sunlight filtering through branches above, the weight lifted off their shoulders felt almost tangible, a release from burdens carried too long alone. Days turned into weeks after returning home. Life resumed its normal rhythm, yet something fundamental shifted within each boy. They no longer felt haunted by shadows lurking just outside nor whispers echoing through empty halls at night. Instead, there existed clarity gained through understanding history intertwined with choices made long ago. A reminder that some treasures are not meant for claiming but rather learning from instead. And so ended one chapter while opening another, a new beginning unfurling like fresh pages waiting patiently for stories yet untold. The end. Story number 5. The Guardian of Reality. The night air was thick with an eerie silence as I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. Hi, Thomas had always been the skeptical type, but something about this abandoned warehouse sent chills down my spine. The call had come in just an hour ago. A group of urban explorers had gone missing, and I was their last hope. As I approached the rusted metal doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The moonlight cast long shadows across the overgrown parking lot, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to move in the corner of my eye. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the cavernous space as I pushed open the creaking door. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing dusty machinery and forgotten relics of a bygone industrial era. "Is anyone here?" No response. Just the hollow sound of my footsteps and the occasional scurrying of unseen creatures in the shadows. I pressed on, my heart pounding in my chest as I ventured deeper into the labyrinthine structure. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came when I stumbled upon a backpack, its contents spilled across the floor. A map, some snacks, and a camera, typical explorer gear. But what caught my eye was the state of the camera. Its lens was shattered, and the memory card was missing. Whatever had happened here, someone or something didn't want it documented. As I examined the scene, a faint whimper echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Hope surged through me. Could it be one of the missing explorers? I quickened my pace, following the sound through a maze of corridors and empty rooms. The whimpering grew louder as I approached a heavy metal door. It was slightly ajar, and a sickly green light spilled out from the crack. With trembling hands, I pushed it open, revealing a sight that would haunt me for years to come. 5 people, the missing explorers, were suspended in midair, their bodies contorted in impossible angles. Their eyes were wide with terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. And surrounding them was a pulsating, otherworldly energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling from what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate hoax or hallucination. But as I turned to run, to call for backup, to do anything but face this nightmare, I heard a voice. It was barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Help us, please," one of the explorers, a young man with wild, terrified eyes, was looking directly at me. His lips weren't moving, but somehow, I could hear his plea in my mind. I knew then that I couldn't leave them. Whatever was happening here, whatever cosmic horror had ensnared these poor souls, I had to find a way to save them. With shaking hands, I reached out towards the nearest explorer, a woman whose auburn hair floated around her head like a halo in the strange energy field. As my fingers brushed against the barrier, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. Images flooded my mind, glimpses of other worlds, of creatures beyond comprehension, of a hunger that spanned galaxies. I recoiled, gasping for air. The entity, for I knew now that this was no mere phenomenon, but a sentient being, had shown me its true nature. It was ancient, unfathomable, and it fed on fear and suffering. These explorers were its latest meal, and I was to be dessert. But in that moment of connection, I had also sensed something else. A weakness. A flaw in its cosmic design. The entity was powerful, yes, but it was also bound by rules that, if understood, could be used against it. I closed my eyes, focusing on the lingering images in my mind. Symbols and patterns began to form, a language older than time itself. Without fully understanding how, I knew what I had to do. My hands moved of their own accord, tracing intricate shapes in the air. With each gesture, the green energy flickered and pulsed. The explorers' bodies twitched and convulsed, and I could feel the entity's rage building. It knew what I was doing, and it was fighting back. Pain lanced through my skull as the creature tried to invade my mind, to stop me from completing the ritual. But I pressed on, drawing strength from the desperate faces of those I was trying to save. The air crackled with electricity, and the smell of ozone filled my nostrils. With a final, desperate motion, I completed the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening shriek that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, the energy field collapsed. The explorers fell to the ground, gasping and sobbing. I rushed to help them up, checking for injuries. Miraculously, they seemed physically unharmed, though the terror in their eyes told of psychological scars that would take years to heal. What was that thing?" one of them asked, his voice hoarse and trembling. I shook my head, still trying to process everything myself. "I'm not sure," I replied honestly. "But it's gone now. You're safe." As we made our way out of the warehouse, supporting each other on shaky legs, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The entity may have been banished, but I had glimpsed the vastness of the universe in those moments of connection. I knew now that there were things out there, ancient and terrible things, that defied human understanding, but I also knew that we weren't powerless against them. Somehow, I had tapped into knowledge beyond my comprehension and used it to save lives. It was a responsibility I never asked for, but one I knew I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, as the explorers recovered and tried to make sense of their ordeal, I found myself drawn back to the warehouse. The authorities had cordoned off the area, but I slipped past their perimeter in the dead of night, driven by an insatiable need to understand. The building seemed different now, as if the very walls remembered the cosmic horror that had unfolded within. As I retraced my steps to that fateful room, I felt a familiar tingling at the base of my skull. The entity was gone, but echoes of its presence lingered. I spent hours poring over every inch of the room, looking for clues, for anything that might explain what had happened. It was near dawn when I found it, a small, innocuous-looking symbol etched into the concrete floor, hidden beneath years of grime and dust. As I traced its lines with my finger, I felt a surge of energy course through me. More images flooded my mind, glimpses of other places where the veil between worlds was thin, where other entities lurked, waiting for unwary souls to stumble into their grasp. I realized then that my journey was just beginning. The knowledge I had gained, the power I had tapped into, it came with a price. I was now a guardian of sorts, tasked with protecting the unsuspecting from horrors beyond imagination. Over the next few months, I found myself drawn to other locations: abandoned hospitals, forgotten mines, remote forests. Each place held its own terrors, its own cosmic anomalies. And each time, I managed to save those who had become entangled in forces they couldn't comprehend. But with each encounter, the toll on my psyche grew. The nightmares became more vivid, the whispers in the dark more insistent. I began to see patterns everywhere, in the arrangement of stars, in the cracks on sidewalks, in the faces of strangers passing by. The boundary between our reality and the realms beyond was becoming increasingly blurred. One night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by books on occult lore and quantum physics, trying to make sense of it all, I received a text message from an unknown number. The contents chilled me to the bone. "You've done well, Thomas. But they're coming for you now. Be ready." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Who had sent this? And who were they? As if in answer, the lights in my apartment began to flicker. The temperature dropped rapidly, and I could see my breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. A low, rumbling growl emanated from the shadows in the corner of the room. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, the darkness seemed to coalesce into a form. A writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, of teeth and void. This was it. The entity I had banished, or perhaps one of its kin, had found me. As it lunged towards me, I closed my eyes and reached deep within myself, searching for that well of cosmic knowledge that had saved me before. But this time, something was different. Instead of symbols and patterns, I saw faces, the faces of those I had saved. The urban explorers from the warehouse. The hikers I'd rescued from a time-bending forest. The family I'd pulled from the grasp of a dream-eating specter. Their gratitude, their relief, their renewed hope, it all flooded through me. And with it came a realization. My power didn't come from some arcane, alien source. It came from humanity itself, from our capacity for courage, for compassion, for facing the unknown and emerging stronger. With newfound resolve, I opened my eyes and faced the entity. "You have no power here," I said, my voice steady and sure. "This world, these people, they're under my protection." The creature recoiled as if struck. Its form began to waver and dissolve, unable to maintain coherence in the face of my unwavering determination. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, it vanished, leaving behind only a lingering chill and the faint smell of ozone. I sank to my knees, exhausted but triumphant. I knew now that I wasn't alone in this fight. Every person I saved, every life I touched, they were all part of a greater network of human resilience against the cosmic horrors that lurked in the shadows. As the sun began to rise, painting my apartment in warm, golden light, I made a decision. I would no longer simply react to these incursions. It was time to take the fight to them, to seek out these weak points in reality, and seal them before more innocent lives could be put at risk. I packed a bag with the essentials, books, talismans, and tools I'd gathered over my months of dealing with the supernatural. As I headed out the door, I took one last look at my old life. The normal world seemed so fragile now, so unaware of the terrors that lurked just beyond perception. But I would be its guardian, its silent protector. Thomas, the reluctant hero who had stumbled into a war between realities. And I would keep fighting, keep saving everyone I could, until my last breath. As I stepped out into the morning light, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never known before. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with unimaginable horrors and cosmic threats. But I was ready. For every life I'd saved, for every person I'd pulled back from the brink of madness and despair, I would face 1,000 eldritch abominations. Let them come. I, Thomas, would be waiting. The weight of my newfound purpose settled on my shoulders as I drove away from the city, the skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. My destination was uncertain, but my resolve was unshakable. The open road stretched before me, a silent promise of both danger and salvation. As the miles rolled by, I couldn't help but reflect on the strange turn my life had taken. Just months ago, I had been an ordinary person, oblivious to the cosmic horrors that lurked at the edges of our reality. Now, I was their sworn enemy, a guardian of humanity against forces that defied comprehension. My first stop was a small town in the Midwest, where reports of mysterious disappearances had caught my attention. As I pulled into the sleepy community, I could feel the wrongness in the air, a subtle distortion of reality that made my skin crawl. The local diner became my base of operations. Between bites of greasy food, I pored over newspaper clippings and listened to the hushed whispers of the townspeople. It didn't take long to piece together the pattern. The disappearances all centered around an old, abandoned grain silo on the outskirts of town. As night fell, I made my way to the silo. The structure loomed against the starry sky, a dark monolith that seemed to absorb the moonlight. With each step closer, the air grew thicker, as if reality itself was struggling to maintain its integrity. Inside, the silo was a nightmare of twisted metal and impossible geometries. Staircases led to nowhere, and doorways opened onto voids that hurt the eyes to look at. And there, suspended in the center of the chaos, were the missing townspeople, frozen in time, their faces contorted in silent screams. I took a deep breath, centering myself. The entity responsible for this was powerful, perhaps even more so than the one I had faced in the warehouse. But I was stronger now, more experienced. I reached out with my mind, probing the fabric of reality for weaknesses. The battle that ensued was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The entity, a being of pure chaos and madness, assaulted my senses with visions of cosmic horror. I saw the birth and death of universes, the slow decay of reality itself, and the yawning void that waited to consume all of existence. But for every terrifying vision, I countered with memories of hope and human resilience. I thought of the urban explorers I had saved, of the family I had rescued from the Dream Eater, of every person who had found the strength to face their fears and emerge victorious. The air crackled with energy as reality itself seemed to warp and bend around us. The suspended townspeople began to twitch and stir, caught in the crossfire of our cosmic battle. I could feel my strength waning, my grip on sanity slipping as the entity's assault intensified. In that moment of near defeat, I had an epiphany. All this time, I had been fighting these entities on their terms, in the realm of cosmic forces and eldritch knowledge. But my true strength lay in my humanity, in the very thing these beings could never understand. With the last of my energy, I reached out to the townspeople, not with my mind, but with my heart. I felt their fear, their confusion, their desperate desire to return to their loved ones. And I channeled all of that emotion, all of that raw human experience, into a single, powerful burst of energy. The entity recoiled, shrieking in a language that shattered windows for miles around. Its form began to dissolve, unable to maintain coherence in the face of such pure, unfiltered humanity. With a final, reality-bending implosion, it vanished, taking its twisted version of the silo with it. The townspeople fell to the ground, gasping and sobbing. As I helped them to their feet, checking for injuries, I saw something in their eyes that I recognized, a mix of terror at what they had experienced and awe at the realization that there was more to the world than they had ever imagined. In the days that followed, as the town struggled to come to terms with what had happened, I found myself becoming a reluctant teacher. Those who had been taken, who had glimpsed the cosmic horrors beyond our reality, came to me seeking answers, guidance, and reassurance. I shared with them what I had learned, about the entities that lurked in the shadows, about the thin veil between our world and theirs, and about the power that humanity possessed to stand against these cosmic threats. Some listened with fear, others with fascination, but all of them left with a new understanding of their place in the universe. As I prepared to leave town, continuing my journey to wherever I was needed next, I realized that I had gained something invaluable from this experience. I was no longer alone in my fight. Each person I saved, each community I protected, became a new ally in the war against the cosmic horrors. The road ahead would still be dangerous, filled with unimaginable terrors and mind-bending challenges. But I, Thomas, was no longer just a reluctant hero stumbling through the dark. I was a beacon of hope, a guardian of humanity, and a teacher to those who had seen beyond the veil. As I drove away from the town, the rising sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The universe was vast and full of terrors, yes, but it was also filled with beauty, wonder, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. Let the cosmic horrors come. We would be ready. For in the face of unfathomable darkness, the light of human courage and compassion would always shine bright. And so, my journey continued, one town, one life, one victory at a time. The road stretched endlessly before me, a silent promise of both peril and purpose. But wherever the cosmic winds might blow me, I knew that I, Thomas, would stand tall, a guardian of reality, a savior of souls, and a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The end.